Well, here we are at the end of another youth rally, and I have a lot of favorites about the youth rally. Currently, my favorite is going to be sitting on the couch Sunday afternoon. I didn't get to do a lot of sitting yesterday, but another favorite of mine is just getting to see this congregation come together as one power force to put on this youth rally. Really, I think when it comes down to it, I probably do the least amount of work of everyone here, but really very, very thankful to all of you for the donations, for the time spent, for the food made, for the housing. It really has been a blessing to work with this congregation in putting together another youth rally, and I cannot thank you enough. Mosquitoes refused to bite him purely out of respect. If he were to mispronounce your name, you would feel compelled to change it. Once a rattlesnake bit him. After 5 days of excruciating pain, the snake finally died. When he has a 50-50 shot, the odds are 80-20 in his favor. He can speak French and Russian. He can speak French and Russian. Okay, there you go. He won the Lifetime Achievement Award twice. He is the most interesting man in the world. So this weekend, we've been talking about life, and we have this giant poster here, and you'd think it's for advertisement for the youth rally, but really it's just in case I forget the theme, so that I can remember it's life. And we made giant life game pieces, giant cars. Believe it or not, there was a pile of cardboard up here on Friday. All the cardboard that you guys gave, I promise I won't ask for cardboard at least for another year, okay? So we made giant life-size game pieces. We made a life-size life game board and played life yesterday. We were able to sit and hear 4 great lessons from 4 different men giving their testimonies about how God has worked and been faithful in their lives. We've been able to apply lessons to our lives, to practice speaking life, thinking positively about our life, encouraging other people about their lives. Now to wrap it all up, I want to talk to you about the most interesting man in the world. Because we all really, when it comes down to it, I think we all want to have an interesting life or be able to look back on our life and see what we've accomplished. Jonathan Goldsmith is the actor until recently who portrayed the most interesting man in the world. A man whose feats and accomplishments were so great, so much greater than any other man that it borderlined on the absurd. Of course, this marketing tactic got its point across, and the commercial became widely popular because of the quotable one-liners that were comprised of the entire ad, some of which lines I just read to you. If you've not seen the commercial, Goldsmith is seen doing various things that are, once again, exotic and grand. For example, swimming with sharks or polar bears, okay? Rescuing animals and babies from burning buildings, okay? As the firemen run out of the building, he's running into the building, okay? Playing the piano, playing the violin, receiving rewards and accolades. All this happens while the one-liners are being voiced over, okay? The point is to show that this man has everything that he could ever want and is indeed the most interesting man in the world. And what makes him interesting is his talents and the things that he has. Another thing that we worked on at the youth rally, and we work on this every year at our youth rally, is goals for the next year. In the evening, we have different stations that the kids go through, and one of the stations is specifically focusing on goals for this year. So they actually will write letters to themselves for next year when they're here, and they get to read those letters. And as we grow older, our goals and our dreams change. For example, when I was in sixth grade, my goal was to earn enough money by stacking wood for my father to buy a Game Boy Color so I could play Pokemon. Okay, that's not my goal now. Okay, I don't have to stack wood for my dad anymore. I have to stack pellets so I can stay warm. So different goals, right? Now, a goal of mine could like a future goal of mine could be like, and if you want to dream big, maybe when I retire, I could live close to Boston so I could have season tickets to the Red Sox, right? The problem with that is I really don't want to have to shovel in the winter. So I would need a place in the South also. Now, in making goals, we also have to think about the resources that it would take to make those goals possible and then consider whether or not it's worth it. Okay? So there's a lot that goes into making goals and then realizing whether or not those goals are achievable or worthwhile. We need to decide what actually makes life interesting. Okay, the Bible paints us many different pictures of men in various degrees of interest. Okay? For example, Solomon could have really been attributed or labeled as the most interesting man in the world of his time, right? Rich, wisest man in the world, had a long life, had an excessive amount of wives, and some of those things might be appealing to us, but look where it got him at the end of his life, struggling with his faith in regards to God. So though that might be interesting to the world, is it really what is interesting and what makes a life interesting? There's another man in the Bible, and he's found in John chapter 9. And I want to look at him and examine his life and see what makes him interesting. So in John 9, Jesus is in Jerusalem and passes by a blind man. And as he's walking by this blind man, the disciples ask him this question. So as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples ask him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Previous slide. There you go. Thank you. Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The disciples ask Jesus if this man was blind because of his sin or his parents' sin, insinuating that the reason this bad thing had happened to the man was because of sin. But Jesus paints this man's circumstances as a picture of opportunity, not a cause of sin. The blind man from birth, a man that had been dependent and begging all his life, is an interesting man to Jesus because he sees in him an opportunity to display God's glory. Now, we have to be honest with ourselves. Jesus does something gross here. Okay? He spits on the ground enough to make mud. Now, I don't know if you've spat on the ground recently. Okay, but I tried this out. And when you spit on the ground, you do not make a lot of mud. Okay? So I don't know how much spitting he did, but he made enough to make mud. And I'm wondering, this has got to be an odd experience for the blind man. Okay? All of a sudden, there's mud being rubbed on his eyes. And this must be an odd thing to witness for the disciples, but you notice they don't say anything. So I almost wonder if they're kind of used to it at this point. Jesus is doing something else that's odd and strange. I'm just not going to say anything or I'm going to get in trouble. Regardless, okay, he makes enough to cover the guy's eyes, and then tells him to go and wash. And so the blind man goes and does this, and the man receives his sight. All right, let's keep reading. John 9, 8 through 12 says, "The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, 'Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?' Some said, 'It is he.' Others said, 'No, but he is like him.' He kept saying, 'I am the man.' So they said to him, 'Then how were your eyes opened?' He answered, 'The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, "Go to Siloam and wash." So I went and washed and received my sight.' They said to him, 'Where is he?' He said, 'I don't know.'" So at this point, a very uninteresting beggar has become a very interesting man to his neighbors and the people that were used to seeing him begging and, on a regular basis. This was a norm for the people that were around him in his community. And so to see him walking around without the aid of anyone, with his eyes open, seeing, catches their attention. And he is more than happy to tell them what has happened and how he's able to see. As you can imagine, this causes quite a commotion in Jerusalem, enough that it gets the attention of the Pharisees. Now, the Jews were skeptical about this story that the formerly blind man told, because Jesus healed him on the Sabbath. And naturally, as everyone knows, any good Jew knows, you cannot work on the Sabbath. But guess what? Making mud is considered work. Okay? So, yeah, exactly. Dun, dun, dun. So you cannot, and the Pharisees think, okay, that if you sin on the Sabbath, working, making mud, then God will not listen to you. So there's no way that someone could heal by making mud on the Sabbath. So when they bring the man in for questioning and he tells them his story, they don't believe that he was blind. They think that he was making it up. So they do some investigating, and after questioning him about how he was healed. Okay, so we're picking up in John 9, 18. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called his parents, the parents of the blind man who received sight, and asked them, "Is this your son, who was said to be born blind? How does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But how he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews are already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God." That's like, tell us the truth, okay? "We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, I now see." They said to him, What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" You can see how he's kind of goading the Pharisees here. And they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, Why, this is amazing. This is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and would you teach us?" And they cast him out. So at this point, we see here a man standing on the truth, even though everyone was against him, even his father and mother. And this really is a sad thing, because I know his parents must have been surprised and probably very happy to see that he could see them for the very first time. And yet, because of the power and the influence of the Pharisees, they choose to abandon their son so that they're not cast out of the synagogue. And though we could spend the rest of this lesson talking about the flawed logic of the Pharisees, I would much rather discuss the wisdom of this uneducated man that had more than just his physical eyes opened. The man defended himself against the most educated of the Jewish people and called attention to their flaws in their logic and in their worldview. He calls attention to the fact that the Pharisees are blinded by their structure and their tradition, where the man who was blind is seeing clearly, both physically and spiritually. Of course, the results of calling out the people that are in charge is getting thrown out of the synagogue. And so the man finds himself on the street again, but no longer blind. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who speaks to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into the world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." So the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." So it's at this point that Jesus re-enters the picture. Up to this point, Jesus had a very small role in the story, very small interaction with this man, but he influenced him greatly. Jesus reappears to drive home what the man, this formerly blind man, is figuring out all along through this story. Jesus asks him if he believes, and after clarifying that he is the Son of Man, the man worships Jesus because that is what you must do when Jesus changes your life. There is nothing else we can do but worship. Jesus ends by saying that he makes people that are blind to see. And those that think they can see may in fact be blind. The story shows the potential of the influence of the most interesting man in the world, that being Jesus. He wasn't the best looking, wasn't the most popular, especially not with the Pharisees, didn't have the most things, didn't have the nicest house. But his ability to influence those that needed influencing makes him amazing. In this miracle, Jesus takes a blind man, influences him by giving him his sight, but does it in a way that shows that doing good works on the Sabbath is not wrong. God did not make the Sabbath holy to avoid doing good, but so that you could do good for others. In this deed, Jesus influences the blind man. And the blind man becomes interesting to other people because Jesus touched him. Through the physical act of healing, Jesus showed the man that he is Lord. And the blind man, now able to see, told his story to all that would listen. And there were a lot of people willing to listen. All of this was done because Jesus influenced a man who was blind and trusted that the man would pass on the goodness of Jesus to others. Jesus saw the potential and had faith in the man to share. Jesus said at the beginning of the chapter that he is the light of the world, and therefore those who see him are not blind. And at the end of the chapter, he tells the Pharisees that they are blind because they refuse to see him for who he actually is. So I ask you, what makes you interesting? What is the area in your life that Jesus can make you interesting? Now, we don't know how many years that this man sat on the side of the road and begged, but when Jesus came into his life and influenced him, the man was ready to share how Jesus changed his life. So what makes your life interesting? And how can Jesus influence it? And maybe you find yourself in high school just counting the days till summer, trying to survive until this season of your life passes. Well, the good news is that you won't be in school forever, okay? But the bad news is that there's just going to be something else that will fill that spot in your life. And where can Jesus influence you? God wants you to do more than just survive. Life is more than just surviving. It's about how can we share God and what God has done in our lives with others. He gave the blind man sight. Where are you blind? Maybe you are in a job that just isn't fulfilling. Maybe it's a boss or a coworker that's just getting on your nerves that you'd rather avoid. Maybe God has put you in that now, at this very moment, for a great purpose, and you just haven't seen it yet. Maybe it's to influence a coworker. Maybe it's to influence someone there. Or maybe it's simply just to bring money home for your family. Regardless of your situation, God can use you in any season of your life. Because we are always so busy, it's hard for us sometimes to hear Jesus' calling influencing us. So take time to be still and to listen. Like the blind man, he was waiting. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but he was waiting. And when he heard the call of Jesus, he acted. I don't know if you've seen this short film or not. It's called The Butterfly Circus. It was published in 2010. And it takes place in the Great Depression in the 1930s. Nick Vucic plays a man with tetra-amelia syndrome, which means that he has no fully formed limbs. Okay, and the only employment that his character Will can find in this short film is a freak at a freak show, and his job is to sit on a stool where people come and they pay to laugh at him and throw things at him and spit on him. All he does is sit there and take their abuse. Until one day, Mr. Mendez, a master of a small circus, comes into town, and he views Will at this freak show, and he gets down and crouches right into his face and looks at him straight in the eyes. And he tells him, he says, "You are extraordinary." And Will looks at him and then spits in his face, probably thinking that Mendez is messing with him, or in reality, he'd probably never heard those words genuinely coming out of someone's mouth before. And so his reaction was to spit on the person that just blessed his life. But the words impacted Will. He chose to come along with Mendez. He actually sneaks onto their carriage when they're leaving town. And he finds himself as part of the circus, but Mendez refuses to let him just simply be a freak at the circus. He must find an act if he wants to be part of this circus. And one day, Will discovers by accident that he can swim. For the first time in his life, he can move at will, at ease, without any hindrances. And so Will becomes a high diver for Mendez's circus. All because Mendez believed in him, recognized in him something that Will never saw in himself. and could not accept in himself. But someone else believed in him, and so then he finally believed in himself. God has given us life because it's worth living for him and to his glory. And God has looked each and every one of us in the face and called us extraordinary. But unfortunately, we've also in turn spat in God's face. Nick Vujicic doesn't just play a man who has tetraamelia syndrome. He actually has this syndrome. But Nick won Best Actor for a short film in 2010 for his performance in The Butterfly Circus. He's married. He has 2 kids. He's also published several books and is an evangelistic motivational speaker. Through his circumstances, though they might not be ideal in many people's eyes, Nick believes that God has a plan for his life and has done as much as he can to share with others how great God is. He's touched by Jesus, the most interesting man in the world, and has become another interesting piece in the kingdom of God, sharing Jesus' light in the world. So I ask you again, where can God use you? There are no requirements. You just need to come as you are. God can do great things in your life. He has already looked at you and called you extraordinary. Why not tell of his love to others? Jesus, the most interesting man in the world, thinks that you are interesting too and wants you to share the light of the world with others. Won't you do it today? Because that's what life is all about. Or maybe you haven't even taken part of the light of Jesus yet. Maybe you haven't found yourself being washed in the waters of baptism. Why not make this day the day that Jesus heals you and takes your blindness away? Today is the best day to start. Today is the day to start your new life.